And we'll go on here. This is the Jagannath Temple at, that's the 2,500-year-old building, the Jagannath Temple at Puri. This is the more modern building, the white one. And this is where young Jesus was a student for about 6 years. Sai Baba of India confirmed that Jesus had lived in India. And we go, I'll put it back here.
All right, so hello. It's June 20th, and yeah, I'm going to do a video on was Jesus in India. By the way, I got notified by YouTube that I have 1,000 subscribers. I'm not sure what that means, but thank you very much if you're subscribing. All right, so yeah, Joe Zimhart here again, and what you just saw, a little portion of an hour and 30-minute video presentation by this guy, Edward T. Martin, who has kind of made a career out of exploring all of these stories of Jesus being in India, and he's a believer, and he also presents cases where Jesus had children, maybe by 2 different Marys. Anyway, it goes on and on. It's had 320,000 views, this particular video, since around 2008. And it starts out by saying, and Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. Luke 5:52. And it says, this is the single line in the Bible that describes the 18 years of Jesus' life from 12 to 30. Where was Jesus during those years? All right, so we have a whole industry of people explaining where Jesus was during all those years. You know, including, he includes information from Nicholas Roerich, who was a cult leader I had followed to some degree, his Agni Yoga teachings. He includes information by Elizabeth Prophet, another cult leader who taught that Jesus was in India. You know, that's where I was first introduced to this, through the Roerich and the Elizabeth Prophet teachings back in the late 1970s. I thought it was a great idea. Maybe he was there. So this guy Martin, I was intrigued that this is still going on. It's a huge industry of people still exploring this whole thing. A lot of what they're doing is based on the information that came out of this adventurer named Nicholas Notovitch. You know, here's a picture of him. And he was a Russian who claimed to be at Hemis Monastery in Ladakh. And while he was there, convalescing after some kind of a injury, a monk showed him a story, a document translated as Life of Saint Isa, Best of the Sons of Men, later being released in translation by him, allegedly translated, Unknown Life of Jesus, and that, calling him Saint Isa, which is the Arabic word for Jesus, by the way. So, yeah, according to the scrolls, at age 13, not 12, he set out traveling towards Sindh, India. And he spent years studying in Tibetan monasteries and so forth. So let me read you something here. Notovitch's writings were immediately controversial, and Max Muller, who was a great scholar of the day in the late 19th century, stated that either the monks at the monastery had deceived Notovitch or played a joke on him, or he had fabricated the evidence. Well, the latter was what was true. Muller then wrote to the monastery at Hemis, and the head lama replied that there had been no Western visitor at the monastery in the past 15 years, and there were no documents related to Notovitch's story. Another Englishman, Sir Archibald Douglas, went and visited the Hemis monastery, explored the whole story, and he was told that Notovitch had never been there, and there's no goddamn manuscript about Jesus. And so, yeah, so, you know, I thought about this myself when I was there in India, and a friend of mine went in 1981, 82, and bought me this book, Buddhism in Ladakh by Dr. Nawan Tsering. And he was a professor at a university there, but he knew the Hemis Monastery and had a dear friend there. And he wrote me a letter that the monk that had lived there most of his life knew about this story of Jesus. And he said it was basically a hoax, that the scriptures at the Hemis Monastery are totally silent about this Saint Isa. In other words, there is no manuscript. So I just did my own personal research on that, and it was confirmed to me by a real person, a real scholar, that the story was a hoax. Yeah. So the hoax thing it appealed to people like Elizabeth Prophet and Nicholas Roerich and these people because there'd been a tremendous industry and interest in translating Hindu and Eastern and Buddhist scriptures in the early 19th century. One of the main, two sources that we have that promoted the idea that these were great scriptures and should be read, and in fact predate and influence Christianity and other religions, according to them. One was Schopenhauer, and the other was the American transcendentalists, Emerson and Thoreau, were influenced by these early translations. So Schopenhauer, who was a pessimist by self-description, and also believed in the force of will as the essence of all the universe and life, and Nietzsche took quite a bit from Schopenhauer and his idea of the will. So Schopenhauer read the Latin translation of the ancient Hindu text, the Upanishads, back after he met this translator in 1814, and he continued to read them. He was so impressed by its philosophy that he called it the production of a highest human wisdom, and he believed it contained superhuman concepts. Schopenhauer considered India as the land of the most ancient and most pristine wisdom. In other words, the primordial tradition that later René Guénon and others came to believe was in India, was in the early Rig Veda and the later Upanishads. So it was the place which Europeans could trace their descent and the tradition by which they had been influenced in so many decisive ways. That was Schopenhauer. And he regarded the Upanishads as the most profitable and elevating reading which is possible in the world. It has been the solace of my life and will be the solace of my death. Schopenhauer was first introduced to this in 1814. All right, so he had a tremendous influence on this idea. So there was this thing in the air that maybe the Western religions weren't all they're cracked up to be, and that they were taken from other places. So people were looking for evidence of that kind of thing. Archaeologists, Indologists, linguists. It was a real industry. Notovitch knew that there was a tremendous interest in this, and so he was interested in it. And of course, he didn't find anything at Hemis Monastery, so he made up a hoax story of this Saint Isa, and it sold very well. And it convinced quite a few people, that, including Elizabeth Prophet, that it was real. In fact, let me read you what she says about it here in her book Reincarnation, which reiterates some of the story of the Jesus in India. Yeah, where is it? Anyway, she claims that Notovitch actually found the manuscript. She says the text was discovered, all right, uses the word discovered on page 89, in 1887 by a Russian writer named Nicholas Notovitch. Later, two other men made the same discovery, Swami Abhadananda, a Hindu teacher, in 1922, and Nicholas Roerich, a Russian anthropologist, in 1925. Well, both of those are fake discoveries, and they've been disproven. I'm not going to get that into here, but Roerich and Abhadananda, which this guy Martin also quotes. In other words, this is like a conspiracy, not unlike QAnon, that people are trying to hide the truth from us. The church is hiding the truth from us, and that the reality is that, if you want to be truly a Christian, and this is Elizabeth Prophet, you have to believe that Jesus studied in India. She does the dedication in her book here to the followers of Christ who are ready to drink the full cup of his message. So, yeah, you're getting the whole story from these conspiracy people. So Notovitch responded to the claims to try to defend himself at first. But once his story had been re-examined by historians and some even questioning his existence, it is claimed that Notovitch confessed to having fabricated the evidence. Bart Erhman, he was a great scholar of the New Testament and quite popular, also looked into this story of Jesus in India, and he says that today there is not a single recognized scholar on the planet who has any doubts about this matter. The entire story was invented by Notovitch, who earned a great deal of money and a substantial amount of notoriety for his hoax. All right, so you can believe Erhman, or you can try to believe someone like Martin or Elizabeth Prophet. Take your pick. You know, I know who I would believe. There was also another approach to Jesus in India, and it was written by this guy who called himself Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. He was the founder of the Ahmadi movement in 1899. So this came after Notovitch's hoax. And anyway, this treatise that he wrote, was published as a book, puts forward the view that Jesus survived the crucifixion. So this is where the story began, that Jesus ended up surviving the crucifixion and going to India and dying in Kashmir as an older man, having fathered children or whatever. And there's a whole cult that in India that believes that all this is true and that is truly the grave of Jesus. He says that he survived the crucifixion, left Judea, and migrated eastward in order to continue his mission to the lost tribes of Israel, traveling through Persia and Afghanistan, and eventually dying a natural honorable death in Kashmir at an old age. So, Ghulam Ahmad applied textual analysis of both the Gospels and Islamic sources, the Quran and the Hadith, and also drew upon medical and historical material, including what he claimed were ancient Buddhist records, to argue his case. Some modern scholars, such as Norbert Klatt, have rejected Ghulam Ahmad's case or use of these latter sources as misreadings of material unrelated to Jesus. In other words, he was using maybe stories about Gautama and Siddhartha and somehow mixed it up with the Jesus story. You can look that up. Look up Norbert Klatt's research and you'll see what I mean, that this Ghulam Ahmad and his cult, the Ahmadiyya movement, completely wrong about this whole thing. So, yeah, the idea of Jesus being in India is intriguing because of the fallout from all of the new science coming in the 19th century and Darwin and all of this, putting into question the strength and the validity of the Christian religion. The Upanishads and Buddhist texts are very philosophical in some ways and explain things about suffering and the idea of the origin and the length of the universe and all of that in much different terms than the Bible and the Gospel do. You know, so you can see why people were attracted to it after being disenchanted with the Western religions. This book on India, just as another reference, by Stanley Wolpert, covers the whole story of India in one book. There's no mention of Jesus being in India in here, which can tell you quite a bit. There's only one mention of Jesus in here, and it only has to do with the fact that during that time of Jesus, there was a lot of exchange between the East and the West, the Silk Route and so forth. And so some of these Buddhist ideas had come to the East and Hindu ideas. In fact, this book states that during this time, many of the early Christians began to adopt a particularly Buddhist or especially Hindu gesture, the folding of the hands when they say namaste, into Christian prayer. So there's some indication that maybe we got this idea from the East. But as far as Jesus going to the East and bringing it back, there's nothing to support that. Nothing at all. So, yeah, I think that you'd be way better off looking at the actual scholars that study real history than going to people like Mr. Barton and his videos in order to decide who Jesus was and where he was. You know, by the way, you can see on this video, he's claiming that Sathya Sai Baba said that Jesus was in India. Well, if you believe anything Sathya Sai Baba said, you're in real trouble. One of the biggest hoaxers in the cult business. He had millions of followers, including many hundreds of thousands in the West before he passed away. He claimed he was the great avatar, meaning fulfilling the Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, Christian ideas of the coming back of the Messiah. He claimed he was all of that. He claimed to do these miracles like spreading vibhuti, which is sacred ash that came directly out of the palm of his hand. It's a magician's trick, and you can look that up. So anyone citing a source like Sai Baba has really got some screws loose in his head, and that's what I think about this whole video of Mr. Martin about Jesus being in India. So that's my spiel on that, and thanks again for subscribing. Have a good day.